What is up, my Jet brothers and sisters, my whole Jet family out there? I want to thank you, like always, for tuning in to the Take Flight Spit and Fire podcast. Thank you for being here on your Monday evening. Appreciate you tuning in. And today is an exciting day. Today, 2 years ago, the Jets made one of the most important decisions in franchise history. It's what it's going to prove. It's going to prove that way. They hired Joe Douglas today, 2 years ago today, which is weird because you think about it. Wait, free agency is over. The draft is over. Isn't that a weird time to hire a GM? We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about that. But as you guys know, Joe Douglas is my guy. This is my guy. I've been telling you guys since the first draft, day after the first draft, I was like, we got a great GM here. We have a guy that knows how to draft, a guy that knows what he's doing. Took all guys except for two that I was really hyped on. See guys coming in again, like always. Thank you for being here for the Take Flight Spit and Fire podcast. Appreciate all you. And this is all about Joe Douglas because this is Joe Douglas's day. And it's our day. It's our day as Jet fans because Joe Douglas is our GM. And I've been saying that he's our future. He's the direction. He's the kind of GM that we hadn't been able to find. He's the kind of GM that for some reason we couldn't get. We didn't have guys like that. We watched other teams that had GMs like that, and we wondered, oh, when's it going to be our turn? So before we even hired Joe Douglas, as you guys remember, at the time of the hiring, right when Maccagnan got fired at a weird time, he was actually the most wanted GM at the time. So a lot of people, and we're going to get back to this, the whole Joe Douglas, Adam Gase thing. I had said they weren't tied together. Their fates were not intertwined. He was just saying what needed to be said. It proved true. And we're going to get to that. Because again, today's episode is all about Joe Douglas. I've been telling you guys so many reasons. I love this. I love that. I've been saying for a while he's a great GM. We're going to start at the beginning. And the beginning was before he was hired. So before he was hired, again, he was the most coveted GM at that moment. He was the number one wanted GM, the number one heralded at the time of, available GMs that could be hired, the number one guy that anybody could want to bring in, getting a lot of interviews. So why was Joe Douglas so heralded? Because he hadn't been a GM before. He was heralded because he came from the Ozzie Newsome school of being a GM, the Ozzie Newsome school of being a GM and drafting. So let's get into this for a sec, because I think many of you guys, like me, I'm a history teacher. You can't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. So Joe Douglas comes from the Ozzie Newsome school. And as everyone knows, Ozzie Newsome is one of the best GMs in NFL history, one of the best drafting GMs too. So in Newsome's first couple of years, and the guys he's drafted, Ozzie Newsome drafted left tackle Jonathan Ogden and linebacker Ray Lewis. Nothing needs to be said about them because that's two Hall of Famers right there. In 2000, he won the Super Bowl with one of the best defenses ever put on a field, and they had a defensive line coach. Who was that defensive line coach in 2000 on that Baltimore Ravens team? That you guys know out there, Rex Ryan. Rex Ryan was the defensive line coach on that 2000 winning Super Bowl team that Ozzie Newsome was the GM of. Now, we talked about Ogden. We talked about Ray Lewis. In 2002, he drafts Ed Reed. Nothing needs to be said. If you don't know who these guys are, you're obviously not a football fan. Next right here, 2003, he drafts Terrell Suggs. Those four guys are guys that he got. He was a key voice in the hiring of John Harbaugh, which makes me wonder. Bear with me. I think you might agree here for a second. Ozzie Newsome as the GM was a big proponent of bringing in John Harbaugh, saying this is going to be our guy. He's a motivator. The players want to play for him. Former player, let's give it a shot. And it worked. Is this going to be the same? That's what I'm hoping, man, is that Joe Douglas getting Robert Saleh. This is my guy, the guy that's going to motivate, the guy that's going to coach the team that I'm going to build. Is the Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh combination. Can it be that Ozzie Newsome, John Harbaugh? That's what we need to hope for. That should be our goal, because that would be amazing. So After they brought on Harborough, the Baltimore Ravens have been in 5 consecutive playoff appearances, 7 overall, 3 AFC championship games, and a Super Bowl win. And Ozzie Newsome leaves with a bang. I mean, we talked about all those 2 Pro Bowlers, Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs as well, who he drafted. Who does he draft in his last year out? Before Ozzie Newsome hangs up the gloves, he drafts the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson. He drafts them their quarterback of the future, the guy I wanted in 2018. One of the greatest GMs to ever be around, ever. And Joe Douglas comes from that school. So I was excited about him in the beginning. I was excited about him as the potential candidate. He's the guy I wanted. So we bring in Joe Douglas. He's hired. The introductory press conference. The first things Joe Douglas says. I liked it right off the bat. Watching his introductory press conference. I actually tweeted it out today, the 2 videos I'm referring to, if you guys want to check them out. Joe Douglas said that he acknowledges the past and the future, saying that the Jets were here long before me and they're going to be here long after me. That's important because that shows humility, and it is he's knowledgeable, but he's not arrogant. He's not like, it's like the world evolves around me. He's acknowledging that there were people before and after him, or there will be after him. So also shows perspective. He also says, loved this line, we're going to find people that hate losing more than they love winning. I was like, wait, what? He said, we're going to find people that hate losing more than they love winning. That's a statement. I love that. He says he wants to bring in passionate people that love the game of football, and he wants players that love to compete. It was great right off the bat. Again, coming from this Ozzie Newsome background, ton of potential, saying these great things. I was excited. But there was a big problem. There was a big issue that we're going to get to next. The big issue was the power structure, the way things were laid out, the impossible situation that he was unfortunately brought into at the time. And it's worked out now. But if you think about it, it actually was a pretty crazy situation. So last thing I want to leave off, talking about that introductory press conference, he gives a message at the end to Jet Nation. He says to Jet Nation out there, you're getting a relentless worker. You're getting someone that understands a winning culture, someone who's going to strive to put a product on the field each Sunday that competes for greatness and hopes to make you proud. Just beautiful. It psyched me up. I was excited. I was excited because, again, the background that I just went through, I just went through it but everyone knows that. You all know Ozzie Newsome was amazing, and that's where Joe Douglas comes from. So his message in that nation, I was like, let's go. I was like, this guy's going to take us there. Wasn't at the great spot yet. I got to the great after the draft, and that's what we're getting to. After that first draft, Ciro, funny stuff, man. Shout out to Ciro. It was after that first draft, man. That's when I was like, this is it. We have the guy. We've been looking for the guy for a long time, and we finally have him. So back to, again, we talked about the introductory press conference. I want to get to the point I was mentioning before, though, with the reporting structure. So let's look at when Joe Douglas was hired, because we said it was 2 years ago today, which is June 7th. So, right, I just want to make sure I have my dates right here. I don't want to mess my dates up. Yeah, we're on June 7th. We're not wrong. Perfect. So 2 years ago on June 7th, Joe Douglas was hired. But you go, wait a minute. The draft and free agency already happened. You guys remember the situation. The situation was screwy. I mean, if you don't believe Mike Maccagnan is the guy, why the hell do you let him build the next year's team? Like, what is happening? Like, everyone's like brain was just like blown out of their heads because it just didn't make sense. But part of it could have been, the ability just to get Joe Douglas is honestly what I'm thinking. Like, they must have thought, maybe he wasn't available. I don't know. But just the ability to get him maybe was potentially enough to maybe, which is understandable. I mean, you guys see it now. If they believed in him that much, maybe they're just like, Mike, screw off because you're not that good. But they fire him and they bring in Joe. So in Joe's interview, I mean, try to just put your head in that mindset. So they sit you down like, okay, so free agency has already happened. We've already had the draft this year. Everyone left available that you can pick up is somebody that, would have been signed a long time ago. So the team's already built. Would you like to be the GM? It's like, wait, time out. What? Wait a minute. So he came in to kind of an impossible situation because the team had already been built. So I wanted to talk about that for a sec because, you know, that's part of the reason, A, he demands a 6-year contract because he knows the dysfunction. Let's be honest. We'll call a spade here. And that's the beauty. You know, Ciro points out, shout out to Shiro because Chris Johnson was in over his head. It's very possible. My big theory, I thought it was both of them for the longest time. I figured, you know, that it was dysfunction all over because I felt that even though Woody is in London, it's his team. I mean, I feel like you have to have some kind of final say. Like, even if, you know, Chris is approving the guy and this is the guy, Woody has to at least talk to him once or meet him once and approve and say, okay, this is the guy. But since Woody's come back, and we're going to get to that, since Woody's come back, things have really changed. So back to, though, the impossible situation that, and again, guys, if you want, just like Ciro, feel free to shout out in the comments, say whatever you're thinking. Love to bring it up. But see, he's brought into this kind of impossible situation. And again, I think that's why he demanded a 6-year deal. And if you guys remember, the Johnsons were actually hesitant at first, which I don't even want to think about. I don't even want to imagine that it doesn't work out. That parallel universe doesn't exist. But they were hesitant at first, if you guys remember. They didn't want to pay him the money he wanted, but he was firm on it because he knew, like I was saying before, you call a spade a spade. No one else is allowed to say it. That's how it is. You know, it's like in family. But in family, we know our team hasn't been good. We know our owners have made bad decisions. We know we've had bad GMs, bad coaches, put in bad positions. Players don't want to play here. We know that. So he knew he was coming in to this kind of situation, and let alone not only coming into that, coming in after the free agency and the draft. Like, that's just kind of insane. It's like your team is 90% built. Do you want it? That's basically what they're saying to him. So he demands this long-term deal. He says, no, if I'm coming in to fix this and make this right. I want, and he wound up getting over $3 million a year for 6 years, which is not a cheap GM contract by any means, but he's worth the money, as he's proven, and he demanded it because he knew he didn't want to, you know, worry about his job being on the line. He knew things needed to be changed. So again, he comes into this impossible situation, no free agency, no draft. He has to deal with whatever he can do. I mean, like we said before, every good free agency is gone. Free agent is gone. All the good free agents have been signed already. They're not available. So you have to work with what you can and kind of make it work, because obviously the team you're coming into is not your team because you weren't the GM. Every GM, we see it all the time, looks at players totally differently. Some have them on boards multiple rounds apart from each other. So obviously it's not his team. So what does Joe Douglas do in this impossible situation? He signs a few cornerbacks. You guys remember, like Montreal Meander. Again, he took some swings because you got to, but these are cheap guys, you know, free agents, bring guys in. So he signs a couple of corners. He tried a few kickers, and Lord, we know that didn't work. But you got to try. That's the point. You have to try. All the good kickers are not available. You guys know that. That's why we were idiots for letting our kicker go. All the good kickers have been paid. So you can't get one. See, he was trying different guys to see if he'll get lucky. It didn't happen, but at least he tried. He tried to bring in Ryan Khalil, veteran, big name. It didn't work out either. But again, if you put yourself in that situation, it makes sense. You're trying to do basically the impossible in the same year. Unless, you know, he comes in and washes his hands and goes, this year doesn't matter, screw this year, which he didn't do. And I think that's the point. We need to acknowledge that. And I don't think that's honestly been acknowledged enough, that he didn't come in and go, I've been put in an impossible situation. Screw this year. Let's freaking tank and get a good pick. He didn't do that. He tried. He legitimately tried to put a good team together in this impossible situation. So we mentioned Ryan Khalil. He signed Ryan Griffin, and that worked out a little bit. He promoted guys from the practice squad. He traded for Alex Lewis. Again, in this impossible situation, these are actually fantastic moves when you look at it from that perspective. So that's big, because I pointed out before, again, all these reasons that he's underappreciated. That's a major one. He didn't phone it in. He could have. He could have said, screw the year. It doesn't matter. I was put in this impossible situation. No one would have held it against him. You think people would have held it against him that it wasn't his draft and this wasn't his team? No one would have held it against him, but he still tried. And I think that's important. He still tried to make a good team. So he tries to. As we know, it doesn't work out, but part of the reason is Adam freaking Gase. So when he was hired, people said, oh, he's buddies with Adam Gase. They're friends. That's why he was hired. They're in bed together. They're going down with the ship together. I knew that was bullshit because think about the situation again. Put yourself in his perspective. The key in this episode, guys, is perspective. You're being brought into a situation where Adam Gase was basically made into Bill Belichick. The Johnsons decided to freaking make Adam Gase interim GM. So he's GM, head coach, judge, jury, executioner. He's the king of the Jets. So what is Joe Douglas going to do? Come in and say, I hate the freaking guy. He sucks at football. He doesn't know what he's doing. He can't call shit. Like, don't get me wrong, we would have loved it. You guys know Jet Nation would have lost their minds if he did that. That would have been amazing. But that's not going to happen. He's going to come in and, of course, say, I've worked with him in the past. He's a great guy. He knows what he's doing. We're going to make a great team together. It's the same reason you see with players all the time when it comes to trades, with GMs, everything. The team is like, this is our guy. This is our guy. They just did it with Julio. This is our guy. This is our guy. Until it's not your guy. You play the game until it happens. So that's important because I feel like when he was brought in, too many people said that. It's not true. And as we know, it's not true. But I've been saying that wasn't true. But not only is he handcuffed by this guy that, as we know, sucks. So it doesn't matter what he puts on the field. Adam Gase is going to turn it into a lump of shit. So it doesn't matter what Joe Douglas gives him. Joe Douglas could have gave him the world, and Adam Gase would have molded it into crap. So, yeah, he's handcuffed by Gase. But not only that, the reporting structure. The reporting structure, guys. At this situation, the reporting structure is still screwed up. It's still like Joe Douglas and Gase at the same level and the Johnsons up top when they shouldn't even be involved. And it doesn't make any sense. We're the joke. Remember, I was even saying we're a circus. I kept saying we're a circus and Adam Gase is the clown. That was what I kept saying. We're a circus and Adam Gase is the clown. Because we were. It was a reporting structure circus. But the Johnsons fixed it. They actually fixed it. They decided to make it right and trust Joe Douglas. And like they say to us all the time, trust the process. They decided to trust the process they put together and give Joe Douglas the keys. Give Joe Douglas the keys to the car, tell him not to scuff and don't mess up the paint, and it's yours to drive. And ever since that happened, it's been money. Absolutely money. So that's why the Johnsons, just a little off topic, have gotten a pass on me lately. Because you guys remember I was very against them. I was upset with this screwed up reporting structure that no other team had that was just so aggravating because we saw how screwed up our team was and the joke we were. They fixed it. They fixed it. And now we have Joe Douglas running everything with Robert Saleh working with him, but reporting to him the way it's supposed to be. Our team is now correct. So thank you, Woody Johnson. Thank you, Woody. I appreciate you making it right. It's late, but like they always say, it's better late than never. So, talked about the reporting structure, all these things. Again, why I love Joe so much, because he's brought into this impossible situation, not just with the team already being built and having to do the decisions he made. And again, not quitting like he could have, but having to deal with Gase, having to deal with this horrible reporting structure. So finally, 2020 rolls around. It's his second season, but it's his first free agency and draft. So again, kind of weird. It's his second season as a GM, but it's his first draft and his first free agency. So as you guys, I hope, obviously remember, Mike Maccagnan bankrupted our team in 2019. We had a GM that couldn't draft. In fact, we had two GMs that couldn't draft. John Idzik and Mike Maccagnan back to back. We had two GMs that could not draft. They didn't know what drafting was. And what they would do is build through free agency. Because basically, and I've made this joke before, when you build through free agency, you're basically saying, well, I don't know how to evaluate talent. I don't know what to look for. I don't know how to evaluate talent. So I'm going to let other teams do it and take the guys that they don't sign. I'm going to let them do it and see what happens because they couldn't draft. We're not going to get into instant and max drafting because it will cause me to have heartburn, maybe one of you to have a heart attack. I don't want to do it. So we're not doing that. But the point is, he comes into this situation. Mike Maccagnan had spent $250 million, $250 million in one free agency alone in 2019. He bankrupted the team. If I were Woody Johnson and the man spends $250 million of my money, I don't get how Mike was walking straight. You know what I mean? I thought Woody would have kicked his butt. Like, I don't get it. $250 million. Wrap your head around that. $250 million in one free agency. Now, it would be one thing if he was paying guys that were worthy of the money. You guys remember Henry Anderson, 7 sacks in one season, career highs, pay him $25 million. That makes sense. $25 million to that guy. Darryl Roberts, 7th round draft pick, never looked better than okay in his life. Let's give him $18 million. This makes sense. So not only are we paying $250 million, we're paying $250 million to players that, excuse me, that aren't worth $250 million. Craziness. So Joe comes into this situation. He doesn't have money to spend in 2020. You guys remember the budget. Maccagnan had screwed it up. And again, Joe's thinking long term. It's not just about this year. You remember what I said after this last draft? Joe Douglas is playing chess when everyone else is playing checkers. It's the long game. It's always about the long game. You don't win. You can't win now if you're not preparing and getting ready. You can't just throw it all together. It doesn't work like that. So Joe Douglas knows he needs money next year. He needs money for the next couple of years. Unlike Maccagnan, who's just going to throw money at people because he can't draft, just like Itzik, he understands he needs to have money to spend for guys that are earning of it. So in 2020, what does he do? He basically gives out all 1 year he basically gives out all 1 year deals. He basically gives out flyer contracts. That's what he does. He gives out a lot of flyer contracts. Now, the best thing about those is kind of like same thing we gave to Jarrad Davis. Again, brilliance of Douglas. Same thing we gave to Sheldon Rankins. Again, brilliance of Douglas. I pointed these out. These are both 2 first-round guys from 2017. Jarrad Davis was supposed to be amazing linebacker, and Sheldon Rankins was basically supposed to be Quinnen Williams. But it never panned out. So Joe Douglas gives him a cheap deal. They're both not making a lot of money at all. If it doesn't work out, you walk away, you move on. So everyone crapped on the Pierre Desir situation, but again, perspective. I need to put a team together without spending a lot of money. Well, 2 years ago, this guy was one of the better cover corners in the league. And then he got hurt. Let's pay him, but not give him a lot of money, and none of it's guaranteed. So if it doesn't work out, you're gone. Same thing with Rashad Perriman. He screwed up, and he admitted it. He screwed up in not bringing back Robbie. He said he didn't assess his value properly and probably would have liked to have him back. He is a good receiver. Who wouldn't want a good receiver on your team? Doesn't make sense. Again, I'm happy with the guys we have now. Don't get me wrong. I would rather have Denzel Mims. I would much rather have Denzel Mims over Robbie Anderson. But at the time, he doesn't bring Robbie back. He signs Rashad Perriman. Perriman clearly didn't work out. You guys remember I showed he dropped half the passes that went to him. He had like a 50% drop rating. That's crazy. Crazy town. But again, move on. Cheap deals to try to figure the team out. In fact, out of all the contracts that Joe Douglas gave out in 2020, all of them, only one was a long-term deal. Just one was a long-term deal that either wasn't 1 year or it didn't have an out in 1 year where you couldn't just get out of it. And an example is like Alex Lewis and George Fant. They restructured Lewis, and we're obviously keeping George Fant around. We are, and I'm good with that. I want to keep George Fant. But the option was there. If he didn't play like he played horrible last year, let's just say, they could have moved on from him. Out of all the contracts Joe Douglas gave out in 2020, there was only one player that he gave a long-term deal to, and that was Connor McGovern. Now, you guys know how I feel about him. I'm hoping he steps up because he played much better and pretty well toward the end of the season, but sucked for the beginning half of it. I don't like inconsistently like that from a center. Some people may like it. I don't. I want full good. Give me full good or get the hell out. That's how I feel on it. Plain and simple. So, talking though about the situation though. So he uses all these cheap deals. What does he do? He takes us from one of the most bankrupt teams in 2020. We had the third most money this year. Again, not giving the man enough credit. He took us from the bottom and brought us to the top in just 1 year by having a smart, cheaper free agency because he had to fix what the idiot before him did. He had no control over what Mike Maccagnan did, which is what people need to remember. He had no control over being brought on in June, not having his first draft in free agency, having to fix the team basically with who was available, being stuck with Adam Gase, the reporting structure, having to fix the money. All of this was things that got stuck on him, which is why, again, he wanted that 6-year deal. He said, if I'm going to fix this, it needs to be done right. And if it's going to be done right, it's not going to be quick. So that's what he's doing. And he did do some amazing stuff in just 1 year. By having a smart free agency in 2020, he took us from one of the poorest teams to the third most money in free agency. And what do we do with that money? We paid guys like Corey Davis. We paid guys like Carl Lawson. That's what you do. He freed up the money. And I also said he's not going to go out like Maccagnan and throw money around like an idiot. He's going to pay a guy that's worthy of that money. And if you look at it, there were a couple of guys he brought in that some might argue got overpaid. Some felt Jackson got overpaid. He paid Corey Davis, which nobody argued Davis got overpaid. And Carl Lawson definitely didn't get overpaid. Because you guys remember I've shown how he put up QB knockdowns up there with TJ Watt, statistics in the pressure category toward the top of the NFL. He's going to have 10 to 15 sacks next year. He's going to be an animal on his new team. He's going to be like Shaq Barrett. Getting from the Broncos to the Buccaneers, the translation finally happens. Big sack numbers. That's what we're getting. So, just going through all the things I love about Joe Douglas. I give you all that, over the last half an hour or so. His philosophies. I love the man's philosophies. When I hear him, when he first came in 2019, talking about his philosophies and what he feels a football team should exist of, how it should work, what you should focus on, he just sold me, man. All of this. You guys see all the things I'm pointing out. These are all the reasons I think he's a great GM. And I saw it as it's happening. You see the first draft hasn't even happened. The first draft hasn't even happened with where I'm at right now. And that's kind of my point. I was watching this team, all this stuff happening, and I'm like, okay, we've never had a GM like this. Like, we've never had a guy that's just hitting it across the board, like getting everything right. So we're going to get to that first draft because we're not even there yet. But before we get to that first draft, I mentioned, paying only guys that are 100% deserving of that money. We talked about philosophies. One of the first things Joe Douglas said is he builds through the trenches. He said not just on offense, but on defense. Offensive line and defensive line, including edge rusher, are his priorities. And man, he's speaking my language because you guys can check it out. Some of the first things I ever tweeted was football is won and lost in the trenches. I always say that. Sometimes I compare it to like war because I say offensive linemen, like frontline soldiers, are in the nitty gritty, the nasty of it, fighting hard, and they rarely get the credit they deserve. Everyone else gets the credit. They rarely get the credit they deserve as being the focal point and the most important factor on both sides of that ball. So football is won and lost in the trenches. When I hear a GM repeat my philosophy back to me, I'm ready to go. I'm like, let's do this thing. Like, yes. But also, we talked before about our predecessor GMs not being able to draft and having to build through free agency. He hasn't done that. And that's a big thing we need to talk about for a second because I remember this. You guys, I remember. I actually suffered from it too. I'll give myself, I'll crap on myself for a second. Yeah, James points out just quick, we're still paying deals Maccagnan made that year. That's the point, man. That's the point. Joe came into this impossible situation, and with what he had to work with, it's unbelievably impressive. And that's what was blowing my mind. I was just like, check, check, check. This guy's incredible. Like, if he nails this draft, I don't know. Like, this is it. And he did, man. He did. So let's move on to the draft, because you guys remember. So I mentioned all these things, and the draft hasn't even happened yet. Remember, it was, I told you guys, after the draft that I was like, this guy's great. This is a great GM. So you heard all the reasons I gave you before. Now let's get to the draft. All our GMs prior build through free agency because they can't draft. And as we know, that's unsustainable. We saw that in 2015. Mike Maccagnan built an impressive team with top quality talent that he bought and paid for. And it wasn't sustainable. Within a year, there was nobody on that team, because you need to cultivate talent. You need to develop talent. You need to draft talent. The best teams draft the best, not spend the best. And Douglas got that. Why is Douglas not spending a lot in free agency? And onto that for a second. I felt the same way. Us as Jet fans have gotten so preconditioned to loving free agency because of these shitty GMs. And I'm telling you guys, after I was upset and then realized I was upset for the wrong reasons, I got pissed. And I think you guys maybe might agree with me. So I was really excited about free agency back in like 2020. I was super excited. This is this guy's first free agency. What's he going to do? Who's he going to bring in? And as we mentioned, he didn't spend a lot. He spent basically nothing and bought these flyer deals to take chances on guys that had potential, but he needed to fix the budget. I hadn't thought of it that way at that time. I was pissed. No, a lot of Jet fans were. I wasn't alone. I was like, what the hell? This guy did nothing. And we had it this year too. If you guys remember, we even did it this year. Free agency started. We didn't get Joe Thuney. Joe Douglas didn't make noise that first morning. And everyone lost their freaking minds. Jet Twitter was like, we were pulling the paint off the wall and burning the damn building down. Like, we were like, what is happening? Then he goes and gets Corey Davis and Carl Lawson that night. And everyone's like, yeah. But we were psyched at the beginning. Same thing like I was in 2020. I was like, who are we going to get? Then we didn't sign any big names and I got upset. But then I realized what I'm telling you guys, that I become so preconditioned because of these shitty GMs that we had to be excited about free agency, almost even more than the draft. I was angry at myself. I was like, we finally have a guy doing it right, and I don't get it. That's when I got it. That's when the light bulb went on, and I was like, he's building through the draft. Forget free agency. And what does Joe Douglas do in the draft? Joe Douglas in that first draft first takes Mekhi Becton. Now, I've said it a lot before because I was just so excited about this pick. I've been high on Mekhi Becton for years. I was watching this kid as a freshman. I'm a big, if you guys follow me in any of my other podcasts, I always talk about that I'm a big ACC guy. I watch a lot of ACC football specifically. It's why I really love Lamar Jackson. I thought it was crazy that these idiots were saying he was a wide receiver and not a quarterback. I was like, this guy's a quarterback, and he throws better from the pocket than you're giving him credit for. But I'd watch Mekhi Becton, and I'd watch this monster of a human being just murder people, just flat out murder people. And I remember the first times I saw him play, I was like, the dude's pretty big. He's a monster. But then I watched him move. I watched the dude kick downfield, and he's as fast as the guy 100 pounds lighter than him. That's when I was it. I was like, this is my guy. And for over a year, all I could talk about was Mekhi Becton. But I had felt like many of you guys, we haven't taken an offensive lineman in the first round since 2006. The odds of us taking an offensive lineman are slim. Now, there were better, not in my opinion. There were better offensive linemen available in Andrew Thomas, Tristan Wirfs, and Jarek Willis. I kept saying Mekhi was my guy. I would take Mekhi over all of them. Didn't matter who was available. Mekhi Becton is my guy. Loved that kid. Like I said, would talk to everybody. Security guard at my school. Hysterical story. We've been talking about, I've been telling him about Mekhi Becton for at least a year. Like every day, or every other day, or every day when you run into each other, I would tell him about him. We'd talk about him. It would come up most of the time. When we drafted him, it was awesome, man. He ran up the stairs to my room the next day, and he's like, "We got your guy. We got your guy." It was awesome. It was really exciting. But this is the guy I wanted. We watched him pulling a freaking truck. We watched him run a 5.140. Like, this was my guy. And Joe even said, I was like, this was my guy. They asked Joe, they asked him, oh, Andrew Thomas wasn't on the board. These guys weren't on the board. Were you still taking Becton? Joe said Becton was my guy. Joe said that Mekhi Becton was my offensive lineman, and I was going to take him over everybody else. And that's when I was like, oh, man, is this for real? Does this guy actually see things kind of like the way I do? Is this guy like the same guys I like? That was when I started to get really, well, first of all, I lost my freaking mind. I lost my freaking mind pretty similar to when we took Zach Wilson. So if you guys saw me lose my mind for Zach Wilson, I kind of lost my mind the same way for Mekhi Becton. I was really excited when we took Mekhi Becton. Like, really excited. So Joe said he's his guy. And hey, Joe Thomas, remember I tweeted this out. Legendary offensive lineman Joe Thomas said that Mekhi Becton was his favorite offensive lineman last year. And his favorite offensive lineman this year was AVT. If Joe Douglas likes the guys Joe Thomas, and if Joe Thomas, likes the guys that Joe Douglas drafts, man, that's gravy. That's like, you don't get a better seal of approval than that, man. You just don't. So, second round of the draft, we got Denzel Mims. You guys remember, we had the pick. Mims was on the board. You all wanted him. I wanted him too. There were other guys I wanted at that pick, but Mims was one of them. We trade back. People lose their minds. Joe Douglas is the worst. He's the shittiest GM ever. He missed the boat. He's the worst. We have to fire him. Not only does Joe Douglas trade back, he still gets Denzel Mims, which you guys remember, that told me something that was massively undertold. People, like, I feel like the most important aspect of that story was not being sold. People were like, Joe Douglas traded back to get Denzel Mims. Everyone's excited. But the most important aspect of that story is by able to trade back and still get a first-round prospect. That means he was quite confident that none of the other teams were going to take Denzel Mims. He has a good idea of what other teams are going to do. And that's a massively underappreciated trait. Because as you guys know in the draft, how the board falls is the name of the game. How the board falls, who goes where, who's available, who, like AVT, you might be able to trade up for. If you can understand what other teams are going to do, man, that's an underappreciated trait. Massively underappreciated. Like, I don't think it's told enough of how underappreciated that trait is. Again, this man I felt was playing checkers when everyone else was playing chess. So he still gets Denzel Mims. Walks away with Denzel Mims, considered a first-round pick, which is why you guys remember my take. Anyone who tells you Denzel Mims can't be a wide receiver one is out of their mind. It doesn't make sense. Most wide receiver ones had mediocre rookie years. Most rookies get hurt, banged up. Mims hurt both of his hamstrings. When he played, he was fantastic, made some amazing catches. He could totally be a wide receiver one. This kid was supposed to be a first-round pick. This year, he takes Elijah Moore. This year, Joe Douglas takes a wide receiver that was even better than Denzel Mims and was an even higher prospect and also got him in the second round. Man, Joe Douglas, just Joe freaking Douglas. So we go back to the 2020 draft. Next, he takes Ashtyn Davis. The second Joe Douglas took Ashtyn Davis, my reaction was, you know what? If we're giving away and trading one of our safeties, and at the time we thought it was Marcus May, if we're trading away Marcus May, this isn't a bad pickup because Ashtyn Davis is a freaking burner. Like, this dude is a track star, hurdle star. Like, this dude gets going. Like, you watch him in track, and it's kind of like when you watch Javelin Guidry in track. Like, everyone else is running in slow motion. It's, like, ridiculous. So I didn't mind the pick at all if you're trading away a safety. And we're going to get to the Jamal Adams trade. We're going to come back to that because that's just, again, one of the 1,000 reasons why Joe Douglas is a great GM. I'm saying it. Joe Douglas is a great GM. I've been saying it since that first draft, and we're proving it true now. So as you guys remember, I've been saying it since the day after the first draft. I loved every pick of Joe Douglas's but two. This is back in 2020. This year, he freaking killed it. You guys remember my take. I wasn't even looking at safeties. This guy is looking at Keanu Neal type hybrid linebackers, and I don't even think like that. I'm looking at linebackers. I'm looking at 4-3 linebackers like Charles Snowden. He killed it. I went back, reevaluated every pick Joe Douglas made. I didn't hate one of them. I loved, as you guys remember, every pick Joe Douglas made this last draft. But in the 2020 draft, there were two guys I didn't like. I said I wasn't a fan of Jabari Zuniga, and I wasn't a fan of La'Mical Perine. And just to cover that for a second, because I'm not saying I hate them. Please don't take that the wrong way. Because I think some people have, and they're like, why do you hate these guys? I don't hate them. I don't hate either of them. But Jabari Zuniga, he was injured in college and didn't play too much. And when he did play, he flashed a lot, but his numbers weren't high. So Jabari Zuniga was being drafted on raw talent alone. He was being drafted because he was unbelievably athletic, put up great bench presses for a guy his size, and when he played, he flashed some really good moves, but he didn't play that much. I didn't like him at 79. I haven't gone back to my board. I'd have to go back to my board, but I'm telling you guys, there were about 4 or 5 guys, give or take, that I liked more with that pick. 79 was pretty high. So if we would have taken Zuniga at 125 when we took James Morgan, then I would have been cool. Then I would not have hated the Jabari Zuniga pick. So that's an important fact to make. I would not have hated it. I didn't like that we took him 79th overall. I felt like there was a lot better talent available at 79. And I think one of the examples I could think of off the top of my head was Brian Edwards, that wide receiver. Was one guy I really liked there. So next pick, La'Mical Perine, same thing. La'Mical Perine was a power back in college. But in the NFL, he's a little small for a power back. He's only about 212, 215 pounds. He's not the fastest guy. I mean, he's got burst, but he's not the fastest guy, and he's not the quickest guy. So I've said this before, you guys remember my take. My message to La'Mical Perine is I would hit the gym, bro. Sal Avuja was a power back. I would beast out a little bit, man. I would put about 5 to 10 pounds on that frame. I would hit the gym, be a monster, bulk it up, get a little bit more weight, pound it a little bit. That's what we need. Because that's kind of like why I like Josh Adams a little bit more. I feel like Josh Adams was one of the better running backs in the team last year. In fact, if we look at, the averages, even though the numbers were low, Josh Adams was actually better than Ty Johnson. So out of camp, obviously Michael Carter and Tevin Coleman have been the guys, which I like. Don't get me wrong. Tevin Coleman is an excellent pass catching back. He's a good runner, but Michael Carter, guys, you remember I told you guys, I really like Michael Carter. I didn't want to go running back higher than the 4th. We took him in the 4th, but I wasn't thinking about him because I didn't think he'd be there. I loved Michael Carter. I remember that he was slept on because of Javonte Williams, that he was actually one of the better running backs on, probably even better than Javonte Williams. Did you know that Michael Carter actually, with the same amount of carries, averaged more yards and a higher average than Javonte Williams? Fact. So I really like Michael Carter as the running back one. But we go back to these picks for a second. The James Morgan pick. Everyone shit on the James Morgan pick. Everybody crapped on it. But you guys remember, again, the message of the podcast. The message of the podcast has been perspective. And if you go to the perspective of when Joe took that pick, it's not a bad one. And I gave you guys a video take on it at the time. At the time, Joe Flacco hadn't played yet. And Joe Flacco was injured in 2019 and 2018. 2 years he didn't play full seasons. Joe Flacco was a question mark. We didn't know what he was yet. James Morgan. Anybody, if you look back last year, a lot of people had him as a sleeper in last year's draft. One of my favorite things about him, and I've pitched this a lot, I've told you guys if you love deep balls, check out James Morgan. James Morgan has a hell of an arm. I mean, he may not be the most accurate guy and he may not make the greatest decisions, but he's got a freaking cannon. Like, this dude throws the ball downfield and then some. So if you like pretty deep balls, Morgan's the guy. And if you're taking a quarterback at 125th overall, again, he's a project. He's got an unbelievable cannon, beautiful deep ball, got to work on everything else. It's not a bad pick, especially when you remember that Joe Flacco was a question mark. We didn't know what Joe Flacco was going to be. That's important to remember because a lot of people forget that. We didn't know that Joe Flacco was going to be able to stay healthy. So the Morgan pick made sense. Now, the next pick. Man, I loved the next pick. The next pick just got me gravy, but it was the pick after that that really got me excited. So the next pick, he takes Cameron Clark. Cameron Clark You guys check out, I said after the draft, I said that I loved that Joe Douglas drafted Cameron Clark for his nasty streak. He told Cameron Clark he loves the way he finishes. He's a mauler. He likes to put people down. In a way, he's like a smaller Mekhi Becton. That's why, if you guys remember, I really like him for the right guard spot. I felt in this last 2021 draft, there were a lot of offensive linemen that you guys remember I liked in the later rounds. A lot of offensive linemen I liked in the later rounds, but Joe didn't take any of them. That tells me I think he might be a little high on Cameron Clark, and it's understandable. I've given you guys my take before when we talked about offensive linemen. Offensive lineman is one of the few positions in the NFL you don't want to rush a guy out. You don't want to force him out if he's not ready. That's why the NFL-ready offensive linemen go really high. The Mekhi Bectons, the Andrew Thomases, the Tristan Wirfs, the AVTs of the world. There's a reason they go high. They're NFL-ready. They're plug and play. Most offensive linemen aren't. The quality of play between a defensive edge rusher in the NFL versus the college, there's no comparison. No comparison. No comparison to the kind of pressure you take in the NFL versus college. And you don't want to force an offensive lineman out too quick, because against this superior pressure, he'll develop bad technique. He'll develop bad technique, bad form, or even worse, he'll lose his confidence. So I felt that Cameron Clark will probably sit in 2020, but I speculated that he would start in 2021. I figured he'd be the starting guard or tackle in 2021. And it's interesting to note that even though I and most people feel that he fits better as a guard, the Jets still have him listed as a tackle. On the Jets website, they still have Cameron Clark listed as an offensive tackle. So just to throw that out there. But I view him as a guard. I think he'd be a great spot at the right guard. But in camp, again, Lewis isn't there, but it looks like Van Roten's getting the majority of the offensive snaps. It looks like Van Roten is getting the majority of the snaps with the ones. So we talk about Cameron Clark, but this next pick, it was these two. Mekhi Becton, Denzel Mims, and Bryce Hall. Mekhi Becton, Denzel Mims, Bryce Hall. Every other pick, gravy, in my opinion. Those were the guys. I loved Bryce Hall because, again, as we go back to it, ACC football. I watched him play at Virginia, and I loved this kid. I loved Bryce Hall. I wanted him so bad. Other than Mekhi Becton, the other guy I probably wanted the most was Bryce Hall. Now, I knew he was going to – I didn't know he'd be a CB1 so quickly, but feel free to check it. I know you guys like to say, check the receipts. Feel free to check it. I said from the day we drafted him, this kid's going to be an outside starter. I said that Bryce Hall is going to be starting on the outside, and he's going to be awesome. I didn't expect him to be a CB1 so damn quickly. And we're going to get into that because, as you guys remember, I mentioned last year as a rookie, Bryce Hall looked like a CB1. He looked like a legit lockdown CB1. And that was on a crappy Adam Gase team on a bad defense led by Greg Williams. So if Bryce Hall was able to look like a CB1 in that horrible situation, it makes us wonder what he's going to look like with Saleh. It makes us wonder what Bryce Hall could look like with Robert Saleh. But again, guys, I loved Bryce Hall. Bryce Hall was my guy. I wanted him bad. And what's interesting about him is in college, he thrived in the zone. He was an outstanding zone cover corner. But people questioned his man coverage ability. He lit it up last year. Last year, in basically almost exclusively man coverage, he was fantastic. This year, this year, transitioning to a hybrid scheme with many zone and man, I can't wait for it. Bryce Hall is going to be legit. So again, I wanted Bryce Hall. Other than Mekhi Becton, I didn't think we were going to get Denzel Mims, and that's important to note. I thought, and I'd said this before, I thought Denzel Mims was going to go in the first round. I didn't think we'd have a chance with him. In every mock I did, and I did like 40 of them, Mims was gone in the first. See, he wasn't even really on my radar. Like, don't get me wrong, I love him, but he wasn't on my radar. So Hall was the guy I really wanted, but because I knew how good he could be, I wanted him in the fourth round. I wanted him at about 120, where Lamichael Perine went. And as you guys know, if we would have taken him at 120, people would have scratched their heads then, but you wouldn't be scratching it now. So that's where I would have taken him. I would have probably taken him in the fourth. When we got him at 158, I was like freaking out. Like that was it. And that's when you guys remember. That's when I was like, guys, Joe Douglas is amazing. You remember, I was like, Joe Douglas is amazing. He nailed this last draft. He took everybody I like except two guys, and he's a great GM. And everyone was like, whoa, pump the brakes. It's too early. And I was like, that's fine. That's fine. You'll see. You'll see. Eventually, because he's going to keep making the right decisions, because that's what he does. Eventually, you will see what he is. Because I had seen it for all these other reasons. Again, as you guys saw, the draft was one of my last things on the list of like 20 things. So I was falling for this guy. I was like, just check, just check, just check, just check plus plus. Then the draft. And I was like, this man killed that first draft. So, and then we talk about undrafted free agency. So in undrafted free agency, he brings in Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff was my guy, man. Bryce Huff, I loved that guy. You guys can check it out. Back before the draft, I think it was like the end of the season prior, I was talking about how great he was in the Cotton Bowl, how awesome he played. I liked him a lot. I wanted Bryce Huff in the later rounds. I would have taken him 5th, 6th, or 7th, honestly. That's where I was viewing Bryce Huff. When he went undrafted, I was blown away. I was like, I couldn't believe this kid went undrafted. And we got him. We got Javelin Guidry, who you guys know I've been raving nonstop about Javelin Guidry. This kid's been great. Javelin Guidry came in for Brian Poole, one of the better slot corners in the NFL. And the team doesn't miss a beat. That's the most important thing to remember. He comes in for Poole, and not a step is lost. He looks just as good. And it makes sense. Guidry only graded 2 points lower than Poole. He had a 76 coverage grade in PFF last year. Now, granted, it was in limited play, but the kid's physical. He's a freaking burner. He runs a 4.29. And you guys remember this year's draft, I was loving Michael Carter. I was saying Michael Carter II reminds me just like Guidry. Similar-ish measurables, very physical corner, thrives in man coverage, 4.3 40. I was saying Michael Carter and Javelin Guidry are going to be the two inside corners. They're going to be playing on both sides of the interior field, and they're going to be blanketing it. And guys, Michael Carter's looked amazing in OTAs. People talk about not just Michael Carter, the running back, but Michael Carter, the cornerback, also looks really good in OTAs. In fact, with Guidry, he's getting first-team reps, and I love it. These are the two guys. Guidry, undrafted last year. Carter, later rounds this year. Now, he also gets Lamar Jackson, who doesn't get enough credit. Do you know what Jets player had the lowest missed tackle percentage of anybody on the team last year? Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson had the lowest missed tackle percentage, and he played a lot. Now, granted, he had some blown coverage, but he's an undrafted guy, and he's big. He's physical. Like, this dude is big. Like, you're not physically outmatching him. So I really like Lamar Jackson. Now, Lawrence Cager, I'm upset. You guys know I'm going to hide behind my hands, and I'm going to cry for a second, because I really liked Lawrence Cager. You guys did too. That was a guy I was really high on. So it sucks what happened in OTAs. When you get a non-contact injury like that, when you hurt yourself just in the cuts, that's not good. That's not good. It's not. But I really liked him. As an undrafted guy, he was a great pick. He made a lot of sense. So all these great undrafted guys. Hey, Greenbean. Oh, my man Greenbean is here. Shout out to Greenbean. Appreciate you being here, my man. Thank you for tuning in. He says he thinks Lewis will be the backup at most, but Clark I have a whole bunch of hope for. Me too, man. Clark has a ton of potential. Because if you go back to, again, what Joe Douglas said, Joe Douglas told him on the phone when he drafted him, I'm drafting you for your nasty streak. And if you watch him, he puts people down. He plays with a chip on his shoulders. He plays angry. He takes it personal. And that's what you want. You want an offensive lineman that takes it personal. You're not getting to his quarterback. Guys like Alan Faneca, guys like Brandon Moore, guys like Damian Woody, Nick Mangold, shit. You don't think they play with a chip on their shoulders? You don't think they took it personal? When you got to that damn quarterback, Cameron Clark is going to take it personal. So I really, really liked him as the 4th round pick last year. I think he's got a lot of potential. But hey, Tristan Hodge. Douglas also brought in Tristan Hodge, as well as a lot of other offensive linemen. Ferguson, Sales, Parker. He brought in all these undrafted offensive linemen, guys with potential. So he's putting a team together. It's really, really exciting. So all these things, that's been the whole message of this podcast, guys. All these things have been the reason that Joe Douglas is a great GM. But we're not done. We didn't even get to the trades. The trades, guys. Like, all of this is the beautiful cake that is Joe Douglas. And then these trades, it's the frosting, man. It's the icing on the cake that's just so sweet because Joe Douglas murders people in trades. Like, let's take a second to think about this for a sec. For Jamal Adams, a disgruntled safety that has proven he's not as good as advertised, Joe Douglas walked away with 2 firsts and a third and a player. And he only gave up a 4th. 2 firsts. And what did we do with that first this year? We traded it up to get Vera Tucker. If we hadn't traded away Jamal Adams, we might not have gotten AVT. We got AVT because we had that second first-round pick, and we were able to move up in the draft to get the man, to get the guy with a 92.8 pass-blocking grade in 2020, the guy that was the best pass-blocking and best run-blocking Pac-12 guard in all of 2019. Man, that's what we were able to get. We get 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and a player. And we all thought Jamal Adams was the better guy. You guys saw PFF's rating this year. I love it, man. I love it. Just dig in that knife because he's not a good person. You guys know how I feel about Jamal Adams, especially when he had that depression rant. That's what upset me. I'm not going to get into that because it's very upsetting, but he talks about having onset depression like that's real and it works that way. Anyone who has anyone in their life with real depression knows that's not how it works. You don't turn it on and off. We're not going to get into this because I will get upset. I will start ranting. It's not happening. That's when I hated this person, actually started hating him. But we got these 2 first-round picks. And this year, PFF rated Marcus Maye the 7th best safety in the NFL. 3 spots higher than Jamal Adams. So Marcus Maye was like a peacock. Marcus Maye was like a peacock with his feathers in. And then Jamal Adams goes and he gets to let it out. He gets to open his wings and show us what he's got. Marcus Maye is so much better than Jamal Adams was in coverage. So much better than Jamal Adams was in coverage. In fact, Marcus Maye plays in the box, makes all the tackles, plays well in coverage. Marcus Maye is awesome. Marcus Maye is a better safety than Jamal Adams was. And we drafted him in the 2nd round, traded Joy Jamal, and got both of these firsts and a third and a player. Now, let's move on to the Sam Darnold trade. Sam Darnold, whether you like him or not, was statistically the worst quarterback in the NFL. He was, without a doubt, statistically, the worst starting quarterback in the NFL. We had all said, if we can get a 2nd-round pick or even a 3rd, that would be gravy. That would be amazing. What does Joe do? He gets that 2nd. It's next year, but he also gets a 4th, and he gets a 6th this year. Everyone was freaking out. You guys remember, a couple people were freaking out. Oh, man, he didn't do well enough. Wait a minute. We all just said that if you get a 2nd-round pick, that would be amazing. He got a 2nd-round pick. It doesn't matter that it's next year. You guys remember all the things I was pointing out before, being brought into this impossible situation, knowing it's all about the future, building for the future. Rome wasn't built in a day. This is about baby steps. If we're going to get to the promised land, we can't just put all our eggs in immediately. We got to build for success. We can't build through free agency. We have to build something sustainable. It's going to take time. So, Joe Douglas gets a 2nd-round pick. It doesn't matter that it's next year. It's still a 2nd-round pick. Like Matthias said, he likes to trade, and it was a great trade. When everyone, next year, I'm telling you guys, watch it. All the people that said, oh man, this trade sucked, we didn't get enough, they're going to turn around next year and be like, we have a 2nd-round pick. We have a 2nd-round pick because next year will be here sooner than you know it. Again, that's why he took a 6-year deal. It's about building for the future, building sustainable success. So Joe Douglas got a 2nd next year, a 4th round next year, and a 6th this year. Now, let's talk about this for a second. The Atlanta Falcons traded away Julio Jones, one of the best wide receivers to ever play the game. and they only got a second. We, Joe Douglas, got more for statistically the worst quarterback in the NFL than the Atlanta Falcons got for a future Hall of Famer and one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. Let that sink in again, because I just want to say that one more time. Like, let that sink in. Joe Douglas got more for the worst quarterback in the NFL than the Atlanta Falcons got for a future Hall of Famer and and actually one of the best wide receivers to ever play the game. Just mic drop. Take my mic, drop. Joe Douglas is the man. That's what this whole podcast, every second of it, has been about. From everything we've talked about, to the impossible situation he was brought into, to demanding the long-term deal, to making things work, to a smart free agency to fix what Mac did, to having an amazing draft, to having the money to spend this year, building a team, taking Zach Wilson, taking the guy that I wanted. Man, we got Zach Wilson. We got Zach Wilson because of Joe Douglas. We got Robert Saleh because of Joe Douglas. This is all, everything. This last hour, all of it is why Joe Douglas is a great GM. We have a great GM. And I'm excited, man. I'm excited. Because like I told you guys after the first draft, I know a lot felt it was premature. If you don't see it now, you will. Now, if we're seeing it now, it's only going to keep going. That's the point. It's just going to keep going. We're just going to keep drafting properly, not spending a lot in free agency, but going for pieces we need. What you do is you supplement in free agency, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to supplement in free agency. We're going to build through the draft. We're going to give Zach Wilson everything he needs, which is what Joe Douglas has done. We talked about Sam Darnold for a second, and going back to the Sam Darnold trade. Not only did Joe Douglas kill it, Joe Douglas killed that trade. He did right by Sam Darnold. We have to remember Joe Douglas didn't draft the kid. This wasn't his guy. It's only fair to want your guy. Now, Joe could have sent him anywhere. He could have sent him to Washington. But where does he send him? To the head coach he should have had, Matt Rule? To a deep threat he used to be great with, Robbie Anderson? Other guys, Pat Elflein is on the team. I think Joe Douglas did right by Sam Darnold and cleaned up in the process. We have a great GM, and it's only going to go from here. So I see you guys chiming in the comments. Like James says, we got a first for Jamal, 11 picks next year, holes will be filled, fine-tuning the team, become contenders, playoff bound. Exactly. I agree 100%, James. Continuity is key. I couldn't agree more. You've nailed it. That's the most important thing. I think we could be really good this year. I think we have an excellent offense. And again, it's underappreciated what Joe Douglas did. We all know for a fact Mike Maccagnan didn't set Sam Darnold up for success. Mike Maccagnan, he lied. Joe Douglas didn't lie. Mike Maccagnan lied right through his freaking face. Mike Maccagnan lied right to Sam Darnold's mother. He didn't set him up for success. Zach Wilson has Corey Davis, Denzel Mims, Elijah Moore, Jamison Crowder, who I don't think is going anywhere, Braxton Berrios, Chris Herndon, Kenny Yeboah, a much better offensive line, the running back committee, Carter, Coleman, Ty Johnson, LaMichael Pirine. Zach Wilson has weapons. This is an infinitely better team in Zach Wilson's rookie year than Sam Darnold had in his rookie year. And that's what matters. We're building this team and we're setting up for success. Now, because it's such a talented team, I feel, we could really light it up. If Zach Wilson really comes out of the gate like freaking gangbusters and lights it up, plays great, is amazing, man, the sky's the limit. Hell, we could be a 10, 11 win team, possibly. I'm not saying if that happens, I'm going to freak out, but possibly. It's possible. But at the same time, it is a rookie quarterback. I think the talent is there. I think what we're going to see, which is important, is good football. For the first time, we're going to see a rookie quarterback, but we're going to see good football. We're going to see football played right. We're going to see coaching done right. We're going to see players put in the right positions, put in the positions to actually succeed. And even if we only win, let's say 6 to 8 games, I think as long as we look good, as long as the team looks like it's trending in the right direction, like Matthias says, making great progress, trending in the right direction, looking up, then I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay with 6 to 8 wins as long as we look right. And I think we will. I really, really do. I'm excited about where we're going. It started with Joe Douglas. It was the culture change. It started with Joe Douglas. Then we got Robert Saleh, and it ended with the new quarterback. It ended with the new face of the franchise, the guy I wanted, the guy a lot of you guys wanted. And we're psyched. So again, all of this, all of these hour and change reasons are why I think Joe Douglas is a great GM. Like Green Bean says, he agrees. Joe Douglas is a great GM. I've been saying it for a long time, and I know people tell me I'm nuts. They tell me I'm nuts. Remember, you can check. I've been telling everybody my answer. You'll see. That's always been my answer. Don't worry. You'll see. Eventually, you'll see. Joe Douglas is a great GM. Like James says, this team is getting off the field, this team is gelling off the field, which helps it when they're on the field, which makes a lot of sense. And that's an important thing to notice too. James makes a good point. The rookies are grooving together. We saw them at that beach house together. They're grooving together thanks to Brandon Echols there. They're excited. They're at the Islander game together. Dan Feeney's cracking cans on his head. Dan Feeney's like an animal. I love his energy. That's all I got to say. I don't care if Dan Feeney, doesn't start a game for the Jets. He's a hell of a backup because, again, the most important ability is availability. Remember that. Everyone knows that. The most important ability is availability. And in his whole career, he's made every game. Dan Feeney has made every game, and he's always been healthy. So as a backup, he makes a lot of sense. And I love his energy. I just love his energy, man. He's got the mullet. He's cracking the cans on his head. He's ready to go. So I love it. I love it. Like Green Bean says, imagine if every single guy we drafted is a Pro Bowler. Man, that's what got me excited about this draft. I mentioned in the draft prior that afterward, I loved every pick except 2. And again, like I said, it's important to mention, with those 2 guys, I don't hate the player. I just felt like they went too high. If those 2 guys would have went later, I would have been fine with it. But this last draft, there were a lot of guys I wasn't looking at. You guys remember, we talked about it. I wasn't looking at Jamien Sherwood. I knew who Hamza Nasruddin was. You guys remember, I was super excited about Nasruddin. I even said when we drafted Sherwood and we're drafting a safety to play linebacker, I was like, okay, but I would have preferred Nasruddin. That was my honest reaction. I would have preferred Nasruddin. But Sherwood is a murderer. You guys remember what Sherwood said. They interviewed Sherwood. Sherwood said, you can run a 4.2, but when you hit a wall, that ends. I need a shirt. I need a shirt with Jamien Sherwood and a brick wall. That's what he said in the interview. You can run a 4.2, but when you hit a wall, that ends. And that's 100% true. Sherwood, Nasruddin, they're going to be sideline to sideline, making every play. Unbelievable speed for a linebacker, considering they used to be safeties. Unbelievable coverage ability for a linebacker since they used to be safeties. We're going to have something we haven't had in a while, guys that are really good tight ends. Sorry, guys that can cover tight ends really well. Guys that can really cover a tight end. So that's going to be exciting. But like Green Bean mentioned, I wasn't really looking at those guys. I wasn't really looking at safety, so I hadn't looked at Michael Carter. I went back. Even Jason Pinnock. You guys remember, I tweeted how I looked at Jason Pinnock a little bit. I was too infatuated with the line. If you guys remember, I couldn't stop talking about Patrick Jones II and Rashad Weaver. So that's kind of on me. I think, honestly, when I was watching Pitt's defense, I was too focused on the line. I think that's honestly what happened. I was too focused on watching the offensive tackles go like this and collapse into each other, with Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver just collapsing pocket after pocket. So I think I didn't really look at the corners well enough. I should have. So I hadn't looked into Pinnock too much. Then I looked up the stats. And you guys remember, check out my pinned tweet. I showed how Pinnock on an island at Pitt with no help was putting up numbers up to Derek Stingley, numbers comparable to J.C. Horn. I went back, and there's not one pick in this draft that I don't like. I went back after Joe Douglas made his picks, evaluated all the guys he took, and I was like, damn, he knows so much more than me. And I'm so happy. I am so happy that he knows so much more than I do because he blew my freaking mind. Again, I went back, and if you guys don't remember, check it out. I think it was 2 podcasts ago or so, I had the podcast where I went into every draft prospect. Remember, I went into every draft prospect, everyone we took. After thinking about it, I loved everybody. I loved every single pick he took across the board. There's not one guy that I didn't like. Joe Douglas absolutely killed it. So that's been the message here, guys. The message has been, again, me showing you what I'd seen in Joe Douglas. Because as you remember, back at that first draft, I've been saying he's a great GM. And everyone's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I've seen what I need to see. This is it. This last hour and change is everything that I'd seen that after that first draft, I was like, okay, that's it. We finally have a great GM. And we do. We finally have a great GM. His name is Joe Douglas. I believe we have the right head coach. I love his energy. I can't wait to see it in action. Joe Douglas has built a great team. Robert Saleh is going to put a great team together on the field with interesting packages. Zach Wilson is the guy. Man, I'm excited. This is our future. As you guys remember, I believe one day we're going to look back. And that draft, when we brought Saleh in the offseason, that's going to be our defining moment. That's going to be the moment that we remember when things finally turned around. That's going to be the moment we remember when we finally became great. That's what I do believe, because we have a great GM. And having a great GM, as I've shown, means so much. Like Green Bean says, Joe Douglas is the boss. He really, really is. Joe Douglas is the boss. He's better than every past decade we've had combined. This is it. This is it, guys. We're finally there. I'd said the culture change started when Joe Douglas came in the building. Robert Saleh and Zach Wilson were the pieces. Those are the pieces of the complete culture change. We have players like Carl Lawson saying, I want to come to the Jets solely to play for Robert Saleh. That's what we're talking about. And Joe Douglas drafting well. Supplementing in free agency, like bringing in Carl Lawson, bringing in an elite edge rusher, a quality edge rusher we haven't had since John Abraham. We haven't had an edge rusher of Carl Lawson's caliber since John Abraham. You supplement in free agency, you build through the draft. And that's what Joe Douglas is doing, building through the draft. So like always, I want to thank every single one of you for tuning into the Take Flight Spit and Fire podcast. I appreciate you all tuning in. Green Bean, Matthias, James, all you guys. I know you have other places you could be on your Monday night. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Again, thank you for coming to the Take Flight Spit and Fire podcast, and I will see you guys next Monday. Take care.